It is a well known fact that great stories rely on one element to make them memorable: change. I read this sentence in a Storycraft book in 2014 and I was hooked. So I began infusing change into the stories I wrote. I pushed my characters and plot through changes, some organic, others unexpected, and was amazed how the depth, pacing, and the overall entertainment value of my stories skyrocketed. As time went by, a realization dawned upon me. Just like in storytelling, change is also an integral part of human existence. When we embrace change in our lives, the universe enables the more dynamic, more unique versions of ourselves to emerge from under layers of dormancy. Hello and welcome. My name is A. David Singh. I'm an author, former neurosurgeon, and medical podcaster. In this episode, I will share how the universe has enriched my life by steering it through numerous changes, or as I like to call them, brush strokes of ambition. If you have navigated changes in your own life or are thinking about bringing change in your life, then this episode is for you. Many thanks to my friend Dr. Renol Koshi, who is a consultant surgeon, for kindly inviting me to present this episode during the annual get together of the UK alumni of my alma mater, CMC Vellore. Since this episode is suitable for a wider audience, it will also be available on YouTube, Spotify, and all audio podcast channels. Let's start at the beginning. Growing up in the 1980s, my primary parental figure was my grandfather, and that made him the most influential person in my life. Among the many lessons he would teach, Grandpa would often encourage me to study hard because one day you must become a doctor, and that day my chest will swell with pride, this wide. Grandpa would beam and hold out his arms as he said that. I always laughed at his histrionics, but I was yet to understand that even though Grandpa was saying those words, I was actually hearing a whisper from the universe. I loved physics and mathematics. Biology was okay, not particularly fascinating, but I started paying special attention to it now because the first brush stroke of ambition had touched the canvas of my life. So I spent my days studying diligently and allowed this ambition to take shape within the boundaries drawn by my grandfather. Years later, I graduated as a young doctor from CMC Vellore in South India, fulfilling both my ambition and grandpa's. That day, his chest indeed swelled this wide. Shortly after becoming a doctor, I began working in a small town located in a criminal region of North India. That town was notorious for petty political rivalries and frequent gang wars. Every second person on the streets flaunted a rifle or had a revolver slinging at their hip. The threat of violence hung in the town's air like an ugly smog. During this phase of life, I kept my head down and concentrated on working with patients. The bulk of my medical practice consisted of internal medicine, surgery, and obstetrics. I was a generalist, but I wanted to go higher and become a general surgeon. Admission into the surgical training program was through a highly contested competitive examination. So I decided to study for the exam with great determination. Earlier, as a medical student, I had been mortally scared of the human nervous system because its complexity had boggled my mind. But one day in early 1998, a thought crept in, tugged at me, and refused to leave. That was another whisper from the universe. It said, "Time to conquer your fears." The whisper both terrified and excited me. Cautiously, I picked up a textbook about the brain and spinal cord called Snell's Clinical Neuroanatomy. Over the next few days, as I learned more about the nervous system, my fascination grew in leaps and bounds. The brain and spinal cord behaved like the commander in chief of the entire human body. Their functions were logical and grounded like mathematical equations. And yet, many mysteries remained just beyond human grasp. Indeed, the nervous system was the perfect example of science and art, weaved intricately to form one biological structure. After a month of devouring Snell's neuroanatomy, I was convinced that I needed more brain and spinal cord in my life. So I discarded my plan of becoming a general surgeon and bought a load of neurology and neurosurgery textbooks. The neurosurgery entrance exam at my alma mater, CMC Vellore, was after 1 year, and I had an year's study material piled up ahead of me. Great. Everything is going according to plan, I thought. Even though hospital work took up my days and evenings, nights were reserved for studying. As I studied deep into the nights, immersed in the intricacies of the brain, my doggie, named Puppy, slept close beside my chair. In the wee hours of the mornings, when I trudged wearily into the bedroom, Puppy would run past me, jump on the bed, and be fast asleep before my head hit the pillow. 1 year later, I met the requirements of the neurosurgery entrance exam at CMC Vellore and entered a grueling and rewarding phase. This change in the trajectory of my life would not have been possible had I not listened to that whisper from the universe, which gave me a measure of courage and allowed intellectual curiosity to shape my life. During the first decade of the century, I had the honor of training in neurosurgery at CMC Vellore. Excellence in patient care and surgical skills were ingrained in every cells of our being through everyday experiences. But there were dark clouds that hovered over our lives, a work culture steeped in tyranny, and a hierarchy that was rigid and fanatical. Neurosurgery trainees just 1 year ahead of us were demigods, and faculty neurosurgeons were full fledged gods. They delivered their blessings upon us in equal measures of finesse and brutality. While we became exceptional clinicians and surgeons, we were forced to reconstruct our souls to survive the oppressive work environment. Each of us coped in their own way. How others did it is not my story to tell. As for me, I was invaded by a PAS chimera. What is a PAS chimera, you might wonder? Well, a chimera is a mythical creature with body parts of different animals fused to create a monstrosity. A couple of examples that come to mind are a griffin, which is a half eagle and half lion, and the minotaur, that is half bull and half man. In my case, PAS stands for pachyderm, automaton, slave, which were the three components of my chimera, because the chimera had forcibly transformed me into a pachyderm, automaton, and a slave. Even though this chimera lay siege upon my soul, I was aware that there was light at the end of the tunnel. One day I will become a neurosurgeon. I always kept my eye on that prize while steering through adventures and misadventures alike. Let me tell you one story. The year was 2003. One night at 2 o'clock, I admitted a patient from the emergency room to the intensive care unit. The patient was scheduled for urgent surgery, so I would get called any minute to escort the patient to the operating room. Few moments for myself, I thought, and rubbed my hands gleefully. I had not eaten dinner because I had been running between the emergency room, intensive care unit, and the wards for the better part of the night. Food or sleep? I wondered. Sleep is more important than food, my PAS chimera ordered. Being accustomed to daily deprecation from rungs of humans above me, I hurried to obey. There was a small room inside a neurosurgical ward called N2 ward, where duty doctors could grab a shut eye when time permitted. In that room, two beds were already occupied by exhausted colleagues. I gazed longingly at the third bed, empty and inviting. My bed. I trudged groggily towards the promise of rest. But wait, what's this? Two lumps basked near the pillow, visible under the faint moonlight. On closer inspection, they turned out to be lumps of excreta. Stomping out of the room, I asked a nurse about the lumps. There is a cat in N2 ward, she replied hesitantly. But that was impossible because the girth of the two lumps contradicted their feline origin. A feeble voice urged me to sleep in my own room on the other end of the hospital. But the chimera overpowered my vestigial humanity with a swift blow. Go to sleep now, it commanded. Dehumanized and stripped of self worth at that click in time, I had hit rock bottom. If there was a way to photograph my soul, the PAS chimera would be visible at the zenith of its power, beaming and majestic in its absolute domination over me. Defeated, I obeyed. However, I threw the pillow at the opposite end of the bed and slept with the lumps of excreta near my feet, a small act of defiance against my PAS chimera. Such misadventures that I faced during my neurosurgical training are legion, and I will tell you more about them in the future. But what kept me moving forward, despite such humiliations, was by keeping my eye on the prize. One day, I will become a neurosurgeon. That day came in March 2007, and my grandpa's chest expanded once more with pride. Life as a neurosurgeon exhilarated me. The rapid pace, the adventure of high stakes decision making, and the intricate knowledge and skills that I got to exercise daily. Engrossed in this all work, no play lifestyle, I had barely noticed that the earth had circled the sun many times and I had turned a gray hair or two. That's when the universe whispered again, and a new brush stroke of ambition started coloring my canvas with an urgency. This unique brush stroke had been trying to get my attention since childhood, but had been choked down by the more career oriented brush strokes that you have heard about. To understand the origin of this new ambition, let's rewind to my days as a schoolboy. English classes were of two types: studying English literature like Shakespeare, Bernard Shaw, Robert Frost, and others, and secondly, writing essays. In essay writing, there were several options. We could critique a current event or write our observations about a photograph related to a social or moral issue. And the last option was to write a short story. I always wrote short stories because creating characters from thin air and making them do stuff was simply fun. In retrospect, I now realize that I had been holding on to this gentle ambition since my teenage years. In my adulthood, when this ambition erupted with all the majestic savagery of a volcano whose time had come, the year was 2002, and I was an overworked neurosurgery trainee steeped in patient care and academia. One rare evening, when I could snatch some time away from work, I wrote a scene about a plebeian fleeing Rome on the brink of war. Writing that scene was a silent rebellion towards my professional life of 24/7 work, missed meals, and worse, missed sleep. In essence, it was an act of mutiny against the PAS chimera that had been eroding my soul. That story about the Roman plebeian, intended to be pure historical fiction, percolated in my mind for over a decade. But I could not bring myself to complete it, for something was missing. So the story languished in the depths of my computer, waiting to be rescued. Let's fast forward to 2016. While on a long evening drive across the picturesque Canadian countryside, my wife and I started discussing the old forgotten story. My wife, always the optimist, said that she could see the story shine if I injected magical elements into the existing historical fiction. Her remark really inspired me because, in her words, I heard another whisper from the universe. That whisper told me what had been missing from the story: magic. Once home, I quickly dug out my story from the computer and started rewriting it from a fresh perspective. The next few years were challenging. The entire story was torn down and rebuilt on a new foundation. Magic now formed the soul of the story. Magic wreaked havoc in the lives of characters. And magic acted as a force that could be both good and evil. First Puppy and then my new doggy Ninja kept me company by sleeping near my chair or under my chair while I wrote and rewrote countless drafts of the story. The adoration and warmth I got from my fur babies gave me the strength to move forwards with patience and confidence. This writerly journey that had started in 2002 finally culminated in 2020 with the publication of the first book of Magical Rome Universe. It is called Dead Boy's Game and the Broken Vow. The story is a historical fantasy infused with adventure, intrigue, and danger. It follows three main characters. They come from different walks of life but have a common ambition. All three want to become senators of Rome. Let me show you a short trailer that I made. In magical Rome, a druid transfers life from a living boy to a dead boy. The magical boys grow into men. Both want to be senators and serve their great city, but there are other players with other agendas. Is Arboreus a minion of good or evil? What role does the potion of answers play? And what secret does Calpurnia find in the dungeons? 37 years after the fateful night, the powers commanding that dark magic tempt our heroes to annihilate their beloved city, and a deadly game begins in magical Rome. Themes are powerful elements of a story because they speak directly to readers who are going through similar life circumstances as the characters in a story. The main themes in the Magical Rome story are patriotism, class and gender inequality, and by far the biggest theme, the most important theme, is ambition. How ambition takes root in people from different upbringings and worldviews, how it shapes their motivations and actions, and how ambition has different dimensions or brushstrokes, which happens to be the central message of today's talk. By now, you would have figured out that the lives of the three Magical Rome characters parallel my own life when you view them through this unique lens. If you are curious about the colorful characters who live and breathe inside the Magical Rome universe, please visit magicalrome.com. In the 2020s, I continued my journey as an author with great enthusiasm. However, like in any creative venture, such as music or painting, my life as a writer did not come with a stable income. So, to earn some side money, I began delivering food to people's homes in a Canadian town. I drove around quite a bit in my little white car to deliver food. And while driving, I listened to podcasts where people shared real life stories. I was especially drawn to those stories where people faced hurdles and how they overcame those hurdles, since I was having financial hurdles in my life. One day, when I was listening to a podcast, I heard a new whisper from the universe. How about starting your own podcast? It was an interesting idea, a bold idea. But I wondered, what will my podcast be about? The answer did not come to me immediately. So my mind traveled down rabbit holes, grappling with potential solutions. All of them were discarded one by one. On a wintry day in early 2025, while I was delivering food, my mind began wandering. For no particular reason, I found myself thinking about a scene from the Harry Potter story. In that scene, Harry had to fight a dragon and claim a golden egg from the monster. Now, Harry was an expert at Quidditch, a game in which one had to score goals while flying on a broomstick. So, Harry used his skills as an expert broomstick flyer, outsmarted the dragon, and claimed the golden egg. Taking a leaf from this fictional event, I began planning. I was a neurosurgeon, so medicine was my strength. I should definitely play to that strength. In addition, I'm also a historical fantasy author passionate about stories. So I decided to design the podcast at the intersection of my strength and passion, in which I would invite people of medicine to tell their life stories and entertain and inspire those who chose to listen. Once I was satisfied with the direction my podcast was taking, the next task was to find a suitable name for it. After considering several options, I hit upon Oath and Staff. Why Oath and Staff? I've been asked by listeners. Well, oath refers to the Hippocratic oath which all doctors have to take before starting their journeys as healers. And staff refers to the staff of Asclepius, which is a serpent entwined rod wielded by Asclepius, a Greek deity associated with healing and medicine. You would have seen the staff of Asclepius in the logos of medical organizations and hospitals. The Oath and Staff is a platform to spread the stories of people of medicine who serve humans and animals in all corners of the planet. The audio podcast is available on your mobile apps like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, and others. You can also watch the video version on YouTube and Spotify. To listen to or watch this podcast, please write either Oath and Staff or my name in the search bar of your podcast app and on YouTube. Secondly, if you are a person of medicine and are interested in being a guest on the Oath and Staff podcast, please watch a few guest episodes and send me an email. Introduce yourself and state why you would be a good fit for the show. My email address is david@adavidsingh.com. That is DAVID at ADAVIDSINGH.com. Since I write about ambition in my books, I tend to think a lot about the arc of human ambition. At its core, Ambition is a creative endeavor shaped by curiosity, purpose, reinvention, and designed by multiple brush strokes. Just as brush strokes of paint on a canvas are units that combine to create a landscape, the brush strokes of ambition are the foundational elements of human calling and enterprise. To the naive eye, these brush strokes may appear random, even chaotic, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle scattered on a table. And yet, each brushstroke is a crucial part of a slow building masterpiece that becomes clearer and clearer with the passage of time. That masterpiece is the ever changing arc of human ambition, your ambition. If I may quote from J.R.R. Tolkien's magnum opus, The Lord of the Rings, not all those who wander are lost. And now I invite you to listen to the whispers the universe is sending you. Pay attention to them and discover the vibrant brush strokes of your ambition. Thank you very much for tuning in today and subscribe for more.